Hello, how are you? Welcome back to our channel, La Transmutation. But once again, today we have a very special guest, and let me tell you, I'm immensely grateful that he's accepted our invitation to be here with us. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Matías De Stefano here on the channel La Transmutation. Hi Matías, how are you? Hi, very good. Thank you for inviting me. It's our pleasure, and as I said, our honor to have you here with us. Firstly, since you all know me, what better way to introduce our guest than to let him introduce himself, right? For the people who are watching us, who is Matías De Stefano? Well, a rememberer. I usually say that I'm a rememberer because everything I do, and the reason why everyone knows me, is because I remember. However, to remember has three meanings for me, which have to do with what I do in my life. The first one is that I was allowed to or able to remember what happened to me before birth. My purpose or my mission in this life is to remember, which means to tie back or unite the loose ends. And that is to remember the knots of reality, which is the planetary network, the network of existence, the different parts that were loose. And the third concept comes from the Latin recordis, where the word remember, recordar, comes from, which means to go back to the heart, to oneself, to the I am. So I consider myself to be a rememberer because it sums up the three things that I do. Great. What a great way of presenting yourself. I'm going to link what you said in the presentation about this network, remembering this conjunction of the planetary network. So let's dive into the topic. We know you've been doing a very important job for humanity in this, let's call it, planetary field. Please explain a little bit about your current task for this planetary connection. Please, if you could tell us. In order to understand it using more Aquarian language, which is the era we're in, what we need to understand is that it's as if the planet is a workplace where each one of us is a mobile phone, each one of them with its own brand, its specification, some better models, some worse, etc. But we're having an actualization of the system. So it's as if there were new available apps in that actualization, which is going to happen and which happens inevitably every now and again on the planet. An actualization. So all the phones have to be synchronized in order to download those new apps so they can help improve the operating system. We could explain it like that. So my task, my part of the task, is to be like the servers where the information is distributed so that the wires through which the information will pass and the aerials through which this new information is distributed can flow correctly towards the mobile devices, which is a good metaphor and a good example. Yes, it's something like that. The planetary grid itself is something which is structured by geometry in the planet. All of reality is structured by geometry. And we could say the wiring, the optic fiber through which the information will pass, are the edges and geometrical vertices which constitute a sphere, well, an oval sphere such as the Earth. We're all submerged. Submerged, yes, and when you talk about this software actualization as a metaphor, as we come from a Piscean era and we move into the evolution of the Aquarian era, could this evolutionary plan help us towards a massive awakening? There are two things that meet here. Not only have we just finished a Piscean period of time in which the whole solar system is moving in front of the constellation of Pisces, and that's why it's the era of Pisces. This happened for the last 2,000 years, and now our sun, our solar system, is starting to move in front of the constellation of Aquarius. So not only that, but we're also coming to the end of a 12,000-year cycle called the galactic night and day. It's as if a night finished in the galaxy so a new day can begin. This is what sometimes allows us to understand that we are moving away from a historical period in which we have been submerged in a dream, and now we're going towards an awakening. When we talk about an awakening of consciousness, it has to do with the planet entering daytime. It's a new dawn for the solar system, vibrationally from the center of the galaxy. The thing is, we're also leaving a Piscean era based on magical ideas projected onto an external world, right? So we come from faiths, philosophies, dogmas, belief patterns, etc. And we're going towards an Aquarian era, which is self-referential and about constant innovation of everything that a being can create. So we're moving from let's all live in love, peace and harmony, which was an idea, to let's be practical and all do what we're supposed to do so this can advance. The individuality of self. Exactly. That's how this era is going to color our planetary evolution in the next 2,000 years. So you mean we're in a process going through a transition period? We've just entered what we call 2012, so we're going through a transition which, as you said, takes 2,000 years. What do you really think of this process of connection? What I see is that the transition started between the First and the Second World Wars. To be more precise, around the Second World War. The process of transition started the moment in which globalization was somehow officialized. Up until then, it was more about colonialism, and from then on, globalization. Countries sitting down together saying, although we are different countries, we must have a planetary awareness. We are one as humanity, and we need to set some rules as humans, not just as nations. In fact, the UN was born then, etc. The thing is, from the 1950s, the planet started to realize, to progress towards the importance of the human individual within globalization, whereas before it was more about groups against other groups. And this is a clear moment which shows how the planetary conscious is entering Aquarius, which doesn't mean we're already in Aquarius. We're still in a cleansing of all our belief systems from Pisces in order to enter Aquarius, although we're already in a period of transition. If we follow what you're talking about, this projection towards a future, although time and space do not exist, and we'll talk about that later if you wish, but we could all be talking about this transition taking us towards or turning us into more individualistic individuals or beings, and that our survival in a way might not depend on others but oneself. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Would it be something like that? Exactly. We're headed towards the I am, towards the real concept of the I am. However, we need to experiment the I first. Our ego was killed for such a long time, as we were made to feel like we were the lambs of a religion, we were the servers of, or we were under someone. There were so many hierarchies on a spiritual, religious, philosophical, political, economic, educational level. So many hierarchies of being that the I, who I am, ended up being annihilated. The ego is even killed in New Age spirituality. There's often this concept of we have to get rid of the ego. And what is the problem with getting rid of the ego? The problem is that the ego in Latin means I, right? Ego sum, I am. If I am not I, then who am I? So the concept is that in order to really be, I need to experience who I really am right now fully. I will find out who I am as a being later on, which is much broader. But I need to value myself as an individual first.
And I think the age of Aquarius will value this. I think we're going to live the negative side of this concept first, which will be individualism or egotism, in order to get to the individuality and ego, which will come later on. So if I understood it right, it's an evolutionary process of one's inner being, which will make us reach these processes that is, we can see are already happening. I like to give the example that a few years back you could go for a walk and see alternative therapies like Reiki, and it felt like we were on a parallel world. Now, all of this is being internalized, but as you said, there will be a transition of understanding who we are so that we can then provide to others.
Heart